What's poppin', Thades and Gentledoms? I'm Xavier of the Black Creatures, and this is Thirsty Thursday, a show where Jade and I talk about art, music, movies, and pretty much anything else that's got us thirsty this week. Over the last 5 weeks or so, we've taken a shallow dive into the characteristics, abilities, and weaknesses of three of Black cinema's most iconic villains. The vampire in Brooklyn's Maximillian, Friday's Deebo, and Candyman, to see who would win in a fight to the death. This is the final episode of a 4-part special, and you can check out parts 1, 2, and 3 by using the links down below in the description. To be completely honest, this started out as a joke because I just wanted to talk about movie villains. Anyway. It's late summer in 1990-something, South Central LA. About 9 p.m., the sun has just set. A too-nice car pulls up to a rundown, abandoned home in a residential area. The driver steps out and opens the back passenger door, and out steps an overdressed man who certainly looks out of place, but no one would dare challenge his commanding gaze and posture to even approach the topic. His driver doesn't even look him in the eye. Without a word, he approaches the abandoned home and doesn't hesitate entering. He's never been here before, but anyone watching wouldn't be able to tell by the way he walked straight to the bathroom and stared at the dirty, cracked mirror. He smiled at his lack of reflection and finally spoke with a thick Caribbean accent. Candyman, 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 Candyman. Outside, a bicycle creaks to a stop a block away from the too-nice car. The rider sees the droopy-eyed driver waiting and staring at the abandoned home and rides his bike onto the next street over. The rider heads to the back end of the abandoned home and climbs in through a window. No one would expect his bulking mass would allow him to be so proficient at burglary, yet he manages without making a sound. He sneaks through the house toward a hallway, expecting to find someone dressed nicer than the driver at least, and hears a voice coming from a nearby bathroom. As he creeps closer and closer, it sounds like whoever is speaking is repeating something. Crouching, the lumbering rider makes it to the doorway and peeks through to find exactly what he came for, a man dressed too nicely to be in this neighborhood. The rider notices a ring on the man's rich finger when he hears the last repetition of what the man was saying. Candyman. Candyman. The rider poised himself to step into the bathroom and mug the man, but is interrupted by a towering figure stepping into the bathroom from seemingly nowhere. The figure's mouth moves, but the sound seems to be coming from every direction. Maximillian, you know my name, yet you choose to call upon me. Surely a mistake you won't ever get to make again. Maximillian barely deigns to make eye contact. You have something I want. You've lived well past your own livelihood, Candyman. A curse I've reclaimed as my own, just as I have with the tools of my demise, Candyman responds matter-of-factly. Annoyed and tired of this conversation, the hulking rider steps into the bathroom. Y'all look like some high rollers, he says as he moves in to pat down Candyman for any valuables. Maximillian grabs the rider's thick wrist with surprising ease. I wouldn't do that if I were you. The air is tense, but the rider is unconcerned and notices the ring-fingered hand on his wrist. The rider quickly reaches for it, but is just as quickly met with a fist in his gut. He's surprised and winded by it as he hunches over on the bathroom floor. I would not have done that either, Maximillian says snidely. He intends to return his focus toward Candyman when he realizes too late that Candyman's behind him. Candyman shoves his hook hand into Maximillian's back and says, Deebo had the right idea, referring to Deebo's focus on the ring. Candyman pulls out the hook and Maximillian grunts and then laughs about the situation. I came to ask you about your longevity, but surely I can get my answers from you through other means. His face contorts into its more monstrous state, and he quickly turns to swipe at Candyman, who is no longer behind him. Deebo manages to pull himself together after that first punch and charges at Maximillian, knocking them both through a wall into a living room. Candyman's voice surrounds Maximillian. You can't fight me if you're occupied fighting him. A glassy-eyed Deebo stands up from the rubble. Candyman put him in a trance. Maximillian stands completely unharmed and unconcerned by the situation. You're just delaying the inevitable, he says. Deebo rushes him again, but this time Maximillian punches him through a few legs. I always get what I want. It'll be easier on you if you just tell me. Candyman appears some distance ahead of Maximillian. My legacy will have no competition. Maximillian is too quick when he wants to be and hits Candyman into a wall before he has time to apparate somewhere else. How many walls does this building have? Who knows? Despite your deathlessness, Maximillian says, walking toward Candyman's wall-plunged body, I'm well aware that you can be harmed. We can spend too much time doing this or you can cooperate. He extends his left hand toward Candyman as a gesture of good faith. Candyman reaches out and grabs it tightly. A bee flies out of the sleeve of his fur coat, then another, and another, much to Maximillian's confusion. Bees begin pouring out of the coat, being just slightly more than a mild frustration for Maximillian, whose hand is still being tightly held by a now standing Candyman. The bees quickly cover all of Maximillian, and he's frantically swatting at them and screaming, Do you really think these insects will save you? Candyman, still holding a distracted Maximillian's hand, raises his hook hand high and swiftly brings it down into Maximillian's arm. Maximillian unleashes a visceral, animalistic scream, but also fully extends his left hand's fingers, giving Candyman the opportunity to quickly remove the ring. So we didn't actually get a chance to talk about the ring that Max wears, but at the very end of Vampire in Brooklyn, the movie implies that the ring is what gives him his vampiric powers, since his ghoul put it on at the end and turned the ghoul into a vampire. So without the ring, I'm going to assume that Max would just be a ghoul, undying and rotting, but suddenly not vulnerable to sunlight, holy stuff, and garlic. Anyway, Maximillian stops his panic with the sudden shifting into a ghoul. There is only silence except for the buzzing of the bees. Candyman throws the ring into the rubble of the collapsed walls and says, I told you wouldn't get to make the mistake of calling on me ever again. You are beginning to get on my last nerve, Maximillian says, covered in bees yet unflinchingly. Julius, light it up, he screams. See, I heard about you. While I had hoped to discuss this like civilized apex predators, I prepared for your rejection of my inquiry. Suddenly, the outside perimeter of the building is ablaze. All I have to do is find the ring after you become Crispy, the not-so-friendly ghost. Candyman's usually stoned face shows frustration for the first time, and he rushes Maximillian. He slices, disembowels, impales, and maims Maximillian, but Maximillian is just laughing, knowing full well that no matter how much damage he takes, he won't die. Candyman goes as far as to fling Maximillian's body against every surface he could in a calm rage as the fire slowly continues to engulf the building. In the ensuing chaos, Deebo awakens under plenty of rubble and manages to lift himself out. Exhausted and angry, he emerges to an even further collapsed structure and an ever-growing fire. As he's scanning the environment, he spots a familiar band of gold adorned with red underneath a pile of plaster, wood, and concrete dust. He reaches down and grabs the ring and simply grunts. A few meters away, Maximillian and Candyman are visible violently against the fiery backdrop. Deebo, never known to simply give up, approaches them while putting on the ring. When the two finally notice him, Deebo is sporting a suit, sunglasses, jewelry, and a surge of raw power he has never felt. Candyman is slowly loosening his grip on Maximillian and he says, Wait, Deebo, the fire! But Deebo only says, What fire, punk? And picks up Candyman to hold him in the fire until he doesn't hear screaming anymore. Deebo sees the ghoulish Maximillian slinking away, attempting to find some safety from the encroaching fire, and quickly reaches him just to start punching him with all his newfound power. The fire keeps coming, but Deebo doesn't even feel it, and he keeps punching even after Maximillian is just a grayish-greenish paste mixed in with plaster and ash. The fire is burned out. Deebo stands up in the center of the ash and looks toward the driver parked in front of the remains of the chaos. Start the car!
And the winner is Deebo. As I'm sure you've noticed, there's a lot of things that I talked about in this fan fiction that weren't specifically mentioned in the parts leading up to this, and that's simply because I forgot to mention them. Ta-da! I am fallible AF. But putting three movie universes together that weren't ever meant to interact. There's a ton of variables to consider, like why would Deebo be so resilient, or why would Candyman stay for the fight? Why wouldn't he just leave? There's a bunch of stuff to consider or not consider, and that's the fun of fan fiction. If you want to argue about it, feel free to leave a comment down below, or follow us on Facebook and Instagram to send us a DM, or if you just want to, follow us anywhere. We're also on SoundCloud, Bandcamp, and Spotify, and iTunes. So be sure to like and subscribe to quench that thirst every Thursday. I'm Xavier of the Black Creatures. See y'all next week.